in association with Jaqua Lighting, inspired by the sun, moon and stars.
Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. Reports say the US is going to get tough on Pakistan, but what exactly does that mean for Afghanistan? And with the US funneling money to Pakistan for years now, has the damage already been done? Also on the show tonight, for the US, Guantanamo Bay is like an itch that won't go away. The rash is back, this time with psychologists who authored the torture techniques at the infamous camp facing the heat in the form of a lawsuit from former detainees. Does the US have a double standard on human rights? And will this lawsuit force a rethink on controversial interrogation techniques? Also on the show, Prince Harry gets candid, says no one in the royal family wants to be king or queen, but also says that the monarchy is magical. Before we get there, I'm Aisha Sindhu and these are your headlines. Pakistan says that Kulbushan Jadav has filed a mercy plea with the army chief, claims that the Indian national has confessed again. The Congress-led opposition decides not to back down, opts for a contest by naming Meera Kumar as its presidential candidate. In a break from his predecessor's stance, Emmanuel Macron says peace in Syria is not contingent on Bashar al-Assad's ouster, says he can't think of an alternative to the Syrian president. And the US president defends his choice of the wealthy in his cabinet, says he doesn't want a poor person in charge of the economy. First up, Kulbushan Jadav has filed a mercy petition to Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Bajwa, or that is what Pakistan will have you believe. Pakistan's Inter-Services Public Relations or ISPR in a statement has claimed that in his plea, Jadav has admitted his involvement in espionage and subversive activities in Pakistan. Furthermore, Pakistan has claimed that Jadav, in a new confessional video, has expressed remorse at the resultant loss of lives and extensive damage to property that he is accused of. Jadav, as per the ISPR, has requested the army chief to pardon his crimes on compassionate grounds. The decision comes a day after the Pakistan High Commissioner to India, Abdul Basit, hinted at a softening of stance, saying that there was scope for rethinking in the case. Jadav, remember, was arrested last year from Balochistan, after which the military released a so-called confessional video of him admitting to espionage and terrorism charges. Jadav had earlier filed an appeal with the military appellate court, which was reportedly rejected. He was sentenced to death by a military court in April this year for those same charges. The International Court of Justice had in May halted his execution after India made an appeal. WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui joins me live on the broadcast for more on that story. Taha, does this news strike you as strange, considering that Jadav has still not been granted consular access?
Well, from what we understand, basically, I mean, this is again that one-sided communication from the ISPR, in which they're basically they've given out a statement via tweets and then on their website. In which they have said that this has particularly the new development in Yadav's case. Now, this comes after we, as journalists, have been repeatedly asking the Foreign Office here about the appeal, the right to appeal that Jadav had, that the Defense Minister had talked about on the floor of the House of the Assembly a few months ago, when the conviction had come up, and he had said that he has the right to appeal within 40 days. And despite our repeated asking, and questioning of the Foreign Office here in Pakistan, in Islamabad, the government was not forthcoming with any information and said that we'll let you know about it. And then today, out of a sudden, out of the blue sort of a thing, they've come up with this sort of press statement where they've said that the appeal that he had in front of the appellate bench of the military, that has been exhausted and rejected.
Okay.
And now has also appealed to the army chief, and the army chief, and then again this new video has surfaced. So it's a similar repeat of what we saw earlier on when the death sentencing came out, and the way that was handled, and the way that information was disseminated to the media, very one-sided. Similarly, this has happened also.
So one-sided communication once again. Taha, can we see this development as something of a counter by the military to Abdul Baset's comments just yesterday?
Well, the statements from for the civilians that we've seen been coming are very different from what we see from the military. The civilians constantly sort of talk about how Nawaz Sharif himself or his government, or the Foreign Office, the Foreign Office advisor Sartaj Aziz, all of these people have been talking about a reconciliatory approach, a reconciliatory sort of attitude since the beginning of this case, and even before that they have this reconciliatory attitude towards India. But when it comes to the military, that's a very different sort of take that they have. The military seems to be not backing out of it, even though the very fact that right now the International Court of Justice is hearing this case, and there was somewhat sort of a stay order, and sort of, because of that, legal proceedings had to stop in Pakistan. That was the understanding that we had here in Pakistan, talking to legal experts. But despite that, the military seems to be taking its own initiative when it comes to Kulbushan.
But Taha, tell me, this development, can one read it as a legal proceeding, or is this something else, keeping in mind that the military tribunals and courts in Pakistan sort of are a force unto themselves? How does one read this in the larger context of the ICJ hearing?
Well, from what we understand, basically, this is the legal step according to the Army Act, the Army Act of the Pakistani Constitution. According to them, according to that constitutional sort of provisions, Kulbushan, who was tried under the Military Act, he has under the Army Act, he has these steps to go through. So the first step was his trial, which happened in a military court without any access to information to that. Then after that, there was this the appellate bench, which could have reviewed the case, but apparently we're being told that it has rejected the appeal. And then the process goes to the army chief, and then afterwards to the Pakistani president, and then finally the punishment would be carried out if all of these options are exhausted. So this is the legal procedure according to what Pakistani law sort of merits. But international commitments and international standards and international law, and that is why India went to ICJ, and to sort of bring in the international standards of law being applied to this case that are not being applied. For example, consular access has not been given as of yet, and the family has not been allowed to meet Kulbushan Jadav. They've not been given visas. So all of those problems continue to exist with this particular case.
Okay, so confusing signals once again from Pakistan. We leave it there, Taha, but don't go anywhere. We'll need your input on our next story. In fact, I'm going to segue into that right away. The Trump administration is hardening its approach toward Pakistan to crack down on militant groups posing a threat to the United States in Afghanistan. Danny L. Pagani reports on more as far as this story goes and the Afghanistan connection. He's in Kabul.
For a long time, the United States considered Pakistan its major ally in South Asia, but this story could be soon coming to an end. Reports quoted US officials as saying that the policy toward Islamabad could harden. The administration could step up drone surveillance and attacks on terrorist sanctuaries, and even review Pakistan's role as a non-NATO ally with the possible reduction or withholding of financial support. This is perhaps Islamabad's worst nightmare, a step towards a regional isolation which could benefit, especially in terms of military hardware, the neighboring Afghanistan. In the last 14 years, the United States has given Pakistan more than $33 billion in civil military aid, but terrorist organizations continue to enjoy safe haven in Pakistan's tribal territories, from where they are launching regular attacks on Afghanistan.
نو اوس اساسي خبره دا ده چې په دغه موسم کې چې د اوړي موسم دی دا د یو خو د ګرمۍ موسم دی چې د دوی لپاره جګړه اسانه ده، انتقالات ورته اسانه دي، او د دې ترڅنګ باندې پاکستان هغه اخرنۍ هلې ځلې کوي چې کولی شي کوم موافقت لاسته راوړي، نو ځکه هم موسم د جګړې دی.
But it is not only the Taliban. The Islamic State operating in Afghanistan is based across the border in Pakistan's Orakzai agency.
کله چې داعش مشکل په افغانستان کې پیدا شو، داعش په لومړي سر کې په هلمند کې کوښښ کوو چې هلمند ونیسي، د هلمند نه بیا نور فعالیت وکړي. هلمند په هلمند کې طالبان د داعش کاملا مات شو، اوس یې نوم هم نشته، ځکه دوی هلمند انتخاب کړی و چې پاکستان سره سرحد و زر زر به اکمالات وکړي.
Islamic State fighters are mostly former Taliban unhappy with the traditional leadership, but many of them also come from Uzbekistan. Pakistan has denied all accusation it is providing sanctuary and support for the Taliban. Rather, it claims to be a victim of terrorism. Since 2003, the Taliban has killed 22,000 civilians and nearly 7,000 Pakistani security forces. But Pakistan's complicity, it is also too obvious to be denied. After the recent blast in downtown Kabul, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani expressed his sorrow and anger. He also said Pakistan had a hand in the attack and then appealed to Islamabad.
We want peace with Pakistan. We want to be able to
ما می‌خوایم که سر پاکستان اعتماد کرده بتوانیم و ما می‌خوایم که فرصت برای یک رابطه همکارانه باشد که باعث رشد هر دو کشورها و کاهش فقر در هر دو طرف شود. چالش هم این هست متاسفانه که ما نمی‌تونیم بفهمیم.
The answer seems to lie in the corridors of the Afghan Ministry of Defense.
دې په خاطر باندې چې روسیا او ایران آسیایي میانه هیوادونه د دې نه وډر کې چې اعلی داعش راغی، دا د پاکستان گیم دی. پاکستان د دې لپاره چې طالبان د ایران او د روسیې لپاره وی خطر نه دی، اساسي هغه مور د ټولو تروریستانو طالبان دي. نو خبره دغسې ده چې اصلا گیم د پاکستان دی په افغانستان کې، کله د طالب په نامه، کله د داعش په نامه، کله د القاعدې په نامه، کله د حقانی د ډلې په نامه باندې دلته گیم کوي.
Putting pressure on Pakistan to take action against terrorist groups active within its borders has been tried before with mixed results. But severing ties with Pakistan could also be counterproductive for the United States, as Islamabad could stop sharing intelligence with Washington. This is the challenge and the risk for President Trump administration as it fine-tunes the Afghan strategy.
It is still not clear what precise actions the Department of State will take against Islamabad in order to convince and put pressure on the Pakistani establishment to fight and defeat the terror outfits who are still active within the country's border. What it is becoming more and more clear is that Pakistan is facing more regional and international isolation. More and more countries are considering Islamabad a factor of destabilization for the entire South Asian region and for the world. Daniele Pagani from Kabul for WION.
All right, to talk more about that tangled troika, if you will, as far as the US, Pakistan and Afghanistan go, I'm joined on the broadcast by my colleague, WION's correspondent, Daniele Pagani. He's live from Kabul. Also here with us, Taha Siddiqui from Islamabad, and Senior Associate for South Asia, the Asia Program, Michael Kugelman, also with us on the broadcast. All right, I'll come to you, Daniele, first. Just give us an understanding of how exactly Afghanistan is responding to these reports that perhaps Pakistan might see a cutting down of favor from the United States.
Well, for the time being, there has been no official declaration regarding these new reports coming from Washington. Nevertheless, we can definitely assume that a large part of the Afghanistan political world will very much welcome this. First of all, the president and the Ghani government was backed by the United States of America. Also, the Ministry of Defense, the spokesperson said very clearly that according to them, right now, the major factor of destabilization for the Afghan path towards peace is exactly Pakistan. So we can say that at least in large parts of the establishment, the political establishment and the establishment connected to the Ministry of Defense, this will be a welcome news. But In Afghanistan, there is also a large section of the population and also a consistent part of the army who considers actually Pakistan a brotherly ally, and they do very much prefer Pakistan to the United States. So this is it will be welcomed in a very dual way. Part of the political establishment will welcome the United States' tougher approach toward Islamabad, but others may not, and will work probably with Pakistan to avoid this.
Okay, so a split in how the reactions are coming. Let's not forget that this is still a report, but as it were, Taha, even if it is a report, has it caused concern in Pakistan?
From as Danielle was also mentioning, this is unofficial as of yet, and these are come through sources in Washington that have sort of hinted at this being done. But just today there was a Foreign Office briefing here in which the Foreign Office spokesperson Nafeez Zakaria, in a question that was asked to him, similar sort of a question about these reports coming out. First, he said that these are media reports, so he will not comment on the reports particularly. But then he went on to sort of talk about, which is sort of not what we see most of the time. But he went on to explain himself further, and when he explained the relationship that Pakistan and US enjoy, and he emphasized on the fact that this is a very long-standing relationship and it needs close security cooperation. So in a way, it seemed like he was also worried, and because of that, he was sort of sending out a message to his counterparts in Washington, to the U.S. administration, that we need to work together, and that is the only way forward. And this is what we've seen in the past also, that every time that the Americans have threatened or have cut down aid, Pakistan has come up with this sort of this statement and this narrative that we've been such a strong ally, such a old ally of the United States, and we've been helping them, and that security needs to be further developed rather than retracted and or sort of like finished. And so again we saw similar sort of statements from the Foreign Office today.
Okay, so both of you pointing out that we can't forget there's a rider to this report, and that is the word unofficial. But Michael, do you feel that there is enough evidence outside of this unofficial report to suggest that the United States might be considering a change in stance or policy toward Pakistan?
Well, yeah, might is the operative word. I mean, what's going on here now is that there's a review underway, a very comprehensive policy review within the U.S. government looking at how it should direct its strategy toward Pakistan in the coming years. And it's happening in parallel with this review about Afghanistan policy. And certainly, as I understand it, and as the media reports have suggested, one of the possible options could be a more hardline approach to include cutting aid significantly, and also significantly, something that I've been predicting for quite some time, an expansion of the drone war, which had really winded down significantly over the last few months. But at the same time, I've also heard possibilities about a policy that is not that hard line at all. In fact, one of the things I've heard most recently is that one thing U.S. officials would want to do with Pakistan is to try to use diplomacy to convince Pakistan that its interests are better served by cooperating with the United States and Afghanistan than working against the United States and Afghanistan. Now, the problem with that strategy is that the U.S. has tried that for decades, and certainly over the last 16 years since the U.S. had has had a military presence in Afghanistan. And my own view is that it is very unlikely, if not unfathomable, that Pakistan would sever its ties to the Haqqani network and the Afghan Taliban, the groups that drive the insurgency inside Afghanistan. So given that the Trump administration and Trump himself are, project themselves as very tough on terror and would not really have patience for a country like Pakistan that refuses to crack down on all forms of terrorism, that sets up the possibility of a more hardline policy, which could include the aid cutbacks and also taking the drone war into Pakistan in ways that could involve targeting Afghan Taliban leaders and Haqqani network commanders, and not necessarily only in the tribal areas where most drone strikes have been targeting over the last few years.
All right, so an inherent duplicity that's at work, and one that we've been seeing for a long time now. India repeatedly trying to bring the world's attention to what it calls is Pakistan's support and succor for terror. But let's not also forget that the war of words between Afghanistan and Pakistan is being played out on their common frontier. In fact, in recent weeks, there have been clashes, artillery and mortar shelling between the two sides. And in what could be a case of the pot calling the kettle black, Pakistan has accused Afghanistan of backing infiltration by armed militants into Pakistan. Now, the Pakistani military has begun, or rather it says it's begun, building a fence in the three agencies of Bajaur, Muhammad and Khyber that form part of the federally administered tribal areas of FATA. The fencing is being done in phases with the focus on what Pakistan describes as infiltration-prone areas. It will later be extended to other parts of FATA. Now, in terms of border surveillance and monitoring, the plan includes building forts and border posts. This will aid surveillance and monitoring of the fence. The Frontier Constabulary will be able to respond quicker to infiltration attempts. Now, this Pakistani fence is being opposed by Afghanistan as it's being seen as a move to formalize the Durand Line, the century-old border between the two countries, which no government in Kabul has ever accepted, not even the Taliban, because it divides the Pashtun populace that are present in both the countries. Daniele, you spoke with the defense spokesperson and he very categorically said that Pakistan is using the IS bogey to deflect attention from the Taliban, which continues to be the real problem as far as he says when it comes to Pakistan. What impact, if any, does this have on America's view of Afghanistan and Pakistan when viewed together?
So, first of all, let's say that we are going by what the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense of Afghanistan said. It is not possible for independent journalists to verify this. What is happening, though, and it's very clear, and it's under the eyes of everybody, is that the Islamic State initially had 3,500 to 5,000 soldiers. Now they are 800. So there is a lot of media attention on these, and these fighters are located mostly in the Nangarhar province, which is 3 hours driving from Pakistan. So it makes them very easy to go and come back and go and come back. For that matter, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense told me that even counting exactly the soldiers, the terrorists, is very difficult because they can change every time. So, how is this going to play in the U.S.-Pakistan relation? Well, this is a big thing right now on the plate because there is a lot of media attention on the Islamic State. The Islamic State is carrying on a lot of high-profile attack against soft targets in Afghanistan, so it's acting as a very tough destabilization factor within the country. So perhaps this is one of the reasons for which, one of the many reasons for which the United States decided to try to put pressure on Pakistan. Anyway, we do not have to forget that the real problem when it comes to terrorism and when it comes to insurgency, both in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, is actually the Taliban. So the problem lies a little bit elsewhere.
Okay, Michael, what is the bigger problem for the United States? Is it the Islamic State, or is it the Taliban, or is it terror at large?
Well, yeah, certainly terror at large, but basically, ISIS is not even close to being the most significant militant threat in Afghanistan. ISIS certainly is there, but as we heard, it's not what it used to be. It is resilient. There have been reports that it took over the Tora Bora mountain hideout that Al-Qaeda and bin Laden used to use. That's pretty significant, particularly coming just a few weeks after this mother of all bombs was dropped on ISIS in Afghanistan. But, as we know just from the daily headlines, it's the Taliban. That's the biggest threat. And the Taliban has connections to Al-Qaeda, which remains resilient and significant. The United States certainly has been going after all of these groups, but I think the United States would recognize that, the biggest threat that it's facing in Afghanistan is the Taliban, and by extension the Haqqani network, and Al-Qaeda for that matter. I don't want to say that ISIS is seen as a sideshow, and in fact, President Trump really, I think, elevates and perhaps over-exaggerates the threat of ISIS across the world on the whole. But I do think that the U.S. government and the U.S. military recognize that it's not ISIS that is the major threat to be worried about, but all this said, it's true that terrorism on the whole is the big concern, because one thing that I've said quite frequently is that, all of these groups, ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, etc., they're all cut from the same ideological cloth. I mean, they generally want to do the same types of things. So you can never rule out the possibilities of marriages of convenience and partnerships. You can't rule these things out. So for that reason, the fact that all of these groups operate in Afghanistan, regardless of some of them being stronger than others, that's a big concern right there.
Okay, going back to that unconfirmed report though, Michael, do you think the fact that the Trump policy when it comes to foreign affairs has been fairly difficult to gauge for a lot of people, barring perhaps the Middle East, where it seems that he's made his strategy rather clear with that $1 billion deal with Qatar recently, $12 billion, pardon me, and of course the $100 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia. But when it comes to the rest of the world, if you will, we're not really sure where exactly the Trump administration stands. So even if Daniel Coates goes and says that Pakistan is a haven for terror, even if we're hearing about reports of Pakistan changing its policy, is the concern that the flip-flops from the Trump administration are going to come or are going to create a situation where everything comes to moot?
Oh, absolutely. This is the case across the board. I mean, you have an administration that simply has so many dividing lines and differences of viewpoint. You have more moderate aspects, moderate points of view, you have more hardline perspectives, and you see this playing out across the board, certainly in South Asia, and particularly in Afghanistan, where, you have some key members of the administration that want a troop surge, that want an open-ended long-term commitment. And then you have a more harder line, isolationist, populist faction led by Stephen Bannon, who don't want the U.S. to even be in Afghanistan, ideally. And I think with Pakistan, it's the same. I mean, I think you certainly have some players in the administration that want the U.S. to take a harder line, but there are more moderate types. And quite frankly, I think that could involve people like James Mattis and H.R. McMaster, who have served in the region, have very good contacts with the Pakistani military, and may want to try to take it slower. Though, of course, at the same time, Mattis and McMaster, they've had men killed in Afghanistan by forces originating in Pakistan. So all this said, it's very complicated, and I think one of the reasons why this policy review of Afghanistan and South Asia more broadly has taken so long is that there simply is so much disagreement and dissension, and whether Trump wants to have a team of rivals model where he likes to see these different factions fight things out, or if it's just dysfunction and disorganization and people not being in a position to agree, we don't know.
Okay, Daniele, just to add a few more ingredients to the pot, so to speak, where exactly do America's arch rivals or foes, Iran and Russia, feature in all of this?
Well, this is perhaps the most interesting part of all this game which is happening right now in South Central Asia. So there are reports, there are sources who told me, unfortunately, on condition of anonymity, that the Russians are already providing help, not military help, I have to underline, to factions of the Taliban active in the north of the region, and so is Iran doing. This is perhaps because they consider, on the one hand, they consider the Islamic State a major threat. In this very moment, the leader of the Islamic State in Afghanistan is a citizen of Uzbekistan who has a long tradition of wars in the Central Asia. He comes from the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, and he has strong connections with the militants active, especially in Russia. On the other hand, possibly helping the Taliban both for Russia and for Iran could turn out to be a comfortable way to pull America's leg, to put America in troubles in the region in Afghanistan. Iran is certainly not an ally on the ground of America. Let's just talk about Syria, where they are fighting on Assad's side against the United States. And so is Russia. Let's not forget that Russia and the United States right now are living one of their toughest, at least recently speaking, one of the toughest diplomatic moments. Both countries' jet fighters say that they are ready to shut down each other's in case of anonymous approach. So this is the big game. Iran and Russia are reportedly helping the Taliban in order to defeat the Islamic State, and also in order to maybe, perhaps, pull America's leg. This is very dangerous because this logic of the good and bad terrorists has already been there in South Asia, and it didn't work at all.
Okay, so Taha, don't worry, I haven't forgotten you. I was just waiting for Daniele to, give us a few more details. But just to bring you into the conversation, when it comes to Pakistan, now we know that Pakistan shares a strong relationship with Russia. Now, Daniele telling us unconfirmed reports that Russia is supporting the Taliban in the north of Afghanistan. Pakistan says that it is also a victim of Taliban-led terror. This is a very complex tangle, a web, if you will. How exactly and where exactly does Pakistan figure in its approach to the situation, not just with the United States, but perhaps other allies such as Russia?
Well, in the recent times, what we've seen is that Pakistan, because of a change in Obama's last year's, the policy change, focusing towards Pakistan, there was, this whole aspect of do more. Pakistan has basically tried to find new allies in the region, and we've seen that the Pakistani Foreign Office here and the military, which basically leads the foreign policy in a way, has been sort of leaning more on other strategic partners, and especially in the region. For example, as you mentioned, Russia and Pakistan had one of their first military exercises this year, and that was basically, the media was given a lot of access to it, a lot of information was propagated through the media. And then, of course, we know about China and its regional sort of expansion that is happening. So Pakistan has been sort of hedging its bets for a few years now, that it has been seeing that, maybe the United States may come hard on them. And we are seeing that sort of, unofficial reports emerging now with the review going on in the US with regards to the Afghanistan-Pakistan policy. So Pakistan has already been sort of anticipating these sort of hardships and these measures. And given all of that, it has been, creating these alliances at a regional level, which it did not engage in before.
Okay, so, I started off this discussion by writing the names of Pakistan, Afghanistan and the United States down, but I've had to add India, Iran, China, Russia and even Uzbekistan to that list. I'm going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thanks very much for weighing in on this conversation. Appreciate you taking out the time. Michael Kugelman, Daniele Pagani and, of course, Taha Siddiqui. Okay, on that note, we are going to take a quick break here on the broadcast. But when we come back, we're talking about the CIA and Guantanamo Bay, the rash that refuses to go away. Stay with us.